The silence of my home had always been my sanctuary. It was my retreat from the world, a place where I could find peace and solitude, away from the chaos outside. The hum of the fridge, the soft shuffle of my feet across the floor, these sounds were the rhythm of my life, the pulse that kept me grounded. I cherished it, this stillness that surrounded me like a protective shield. But that evening, everything changed. I was sprawled on the couch, lost in my own thoughts, when it happened. A sudden violent screech broke through the tranquility. My heart skipped a beat. It was the unmistakable sound of a machine in its death throes. The fridge, the one that had been with me through countless years, was finally giving up. I pushed myself up from the couch, a knot of anxiety tightening in my chest. As I approached the kitchen, the noise grew louder, more unsettling. The motor was rattling violently, a deep, metallic groan that seemed to echo through the walls. I stared at the fridge, my mind racing, but nothing came to me. I wasn't handy. I never had been. The thought of fixing it myself was laughable, but the thought of calling someone, of opening my door to a stranger, was worse. I stood frozen for a moment, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. In all the years I'd lived alone, I had never once relied on anyone for help. I was self-sufficient, independent, a woman who could handle whatever life threw her way. But now, in front of this broken machine, I felt small, vulnerable. My fingers hovered over the phone, a strange reluctance making it hard to dial the number of a repairman. I had always prided myself on solving my own problems, but this was beyond me. I took a breath, my resolve faltering, and finally, I reached for the phone. The call felt like a surrender. As I listened to the ringing, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was changing. I had always lived my life in quiet control, but now I was opening the door to something unpredictable. A feeling of unease lingered as I waited for someone to take care of what I couldn't. This wasn't just about a broken fridge. It was about something deeper, something I wasn't ready to confront yet. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table, nervously staring at the clock. The repairman would arrive soon. I had always prided myself on being independent, but today I was about to open my door to a stranger, a man who would enter my space, my sanctuary, and fix what I couldn't. The sound of a car pulling up startled me. My heart raced as I stood, glancing through the window. He wasn't what I had expected. Tall, in his early 30s, with dark hair and a relaxed demeanor, he knocked gently on the door. "Hello?" he said with a soft smile. "I'm Alex. I'm here to take a look at your fridge." I stepped aside to let him in, the tension in my chest growing. He didn't rush, didn't speak much, and his calmness only made me more aware of the quiet in the house. As he knelt down to examine the fridge, I found myself watching him, his movements deliberate and confident. There was something about him, something in the way he filled the silence, that made me forget the usual unease of having someone in my home. It was strange, but for the first time the silence didn't feel empty. It felt comforting. As Alex worked on the fridge, I stood by, my coffee long forgotten, feeling oddly at ease. He wasn't the type to rush or fidget. His focus was absolute, his hands steady as he inspected every part of the appliance. There were no questions, no small talk, just the quiet sound of tools clinking and the soft hum of the kitchen. I couldn't help but watch him. He wasn't like the rough, loud repairman I'd expected. There was something peaceful about his presence. His movements were slow, purposeful, as though he was giving his full attention not just to the fridge, but to the space around him. To me, even though he wasn't looking directly at me. The air in the room felt different now. The usual tension I carried with me, the constant need to control everything, seemed to melt away. I found myself breathing a little easier, my thoughts less scattered. It wasn't just about fixing the fridge anymore. It was about something more, something I couldn't name. He glanced up briefly, meeting my eyes for a second. I quickly looked away, unsure of what I'd seen in his gaze. It wasn't just professional. It felt almost familiar, like I'd known him longer than just a few minutes. But that was impossible, wasn't it? Still, the strange sensation lingered in the air as we both continued in this quiet rhythm, an unspoken understanding settling between us. The silence wasn't just comfortable, it was almost intimate. When Alex finished inspecting the fridge, he stood up and brushed his hands on his jeans. It looks like it's just a minor issue, he said, his voice calm. I'll need a few more minutes to fix it. I nodded, a sense of relief washing over me. But before he could start, something shifted. Alex paused, standing still for a moment, as if considering something. He turned toward me slowly, his eyes meeting mine again. Actually, he began, his voice lower now, softer. Can I check one more thing? It'll only take a second. I hesitated. Something about his change in tone, the way he looked at me, felt different, closer. I didn't know why, but I felt the urge to say yes, to let him stay a little longer. Sure, I replied, not fully understanding why I felt so willing to invite him in. He walked past me toward the counter, but as he did, our hands brushed briefly. A spark, small but undeniable, ran through me. I tried to shake it off, but it lingered. He didn't pull away immediately, and his fingers lingered on mine for just a second too long. It wasn't anything overt, but it felt like the room had shifted, as though something between us had changed. I watched him, the air between us thickening. He wasn't just fixing the fridge anymore. There was something else happening, something I couldn't explain. The tension between us had become palpable, a quiet kind of electricity I wasn't prepared for. He smiled then, a slow, almost knowing smile. I'll get that tea you mentioned, he said, his voice warmer now. It sounded more like an invitation than anything else, and without thinking, I nodded. Yeah, tea sounds good. There was a pause, and for the first time I realized how much I was looking forward to his company. We sat at the kitchen table, 2 cups of tea between us, the soft warmth of the liquid doing little to ease the fluttering in my chest. Alex spoke more freely now, telling me about his work, about the delicate balance he tried to maintain between fixing things, both in his job and in life, and the things that were beyond repair. His words were measured, thoughtful, and for some reason they resonated with me in a way I didn't expect. I think, he said, pausing for a moment, that sometimes we try to fix everything, but there are things that can't be fixed, no matter how much we want them to be. I nodded, silently agreeing. There was a rawness to his words that struck a chord with me. We all had things in our lives that were broken, whether we liked it or not. I had always believed I could handle it all, keep everything under control, but hearing him speak, I realized how much I had been holding on to, things I couldn't fix on my own. Our conversation shifted from his job to lighter topics, but there was an unspoken weight in the air between us now. I noticed how he glanced at me, his eyes lingering just a little longer than they needed to. It made me nervous, but in a way that felt good. And then, in a moment that felt both slow and inevitable, our hands brushed again as we reached for our cups. This time, neither of us pulled away. His fingers brushed against mine with purpose, a spark traveling up my arm, filling me with a warmth I hadn't expected. I looked up at him, and this time he didn't look away. I felt the tension between us rise, thick and palpable, like something was about to snap. And without thinking, I stood up, my body moving almost instinctively. I reached for him, closing the small gap that had separated us, and before I could second-guess myself, our lips met. The kiss was slow at first, tentative, as though we were both testing the waters. But then it deepened, a soft urgency building between us, as if this moment had been waiting for us all along. It was a kiss that didn't just speak of attraction, it spoke of change, of a shift that neither of us had seen coming, but both of us needed. When we finally pulled away, neither of us said anything, the words weren't needed. The silence that had once felt so heavy was now filled with something else, something I couldn't put into words. It was as though the moment had opened up a new chapter, one I hadn't expected, but one I couldn't ignore. Alex looked at me, his expression soft, almost like he understood. And in that moment, I realized that this encounter, this unplanned, unpredictable meeting, had already changed me. It had broken down walls I didn't know I'd built, walls I hadn't known I needed to tear down. I had let someone in. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the need to be in control. For the first time, I felt free.